We made it past the first set of guards, and now it's time to make it past the security systems. In this section, we're going to set up the security cameras and add behaviors to them, which will allow them to rotate and detect Darren using the animation system. Great job making it this far in the course. Keep going, you've almost made it to the end. In this challenge, I want you guys to go ahead and animate our security cameras. So in our hierarchy here, if you open up the security cameras game object, or if you focus in on it, you'll find in our marble floor area that we have two security cameras. And the idea here is that we want to be able to animate them. If you drop down into your security cameras, we have two cameras. We're going to focus on the first one. And if you drop that down, you have something called camera_1. This object we want to animate. We want it to go, the idea behavior here is that it's going to basically pan around in the environment, and Darren will be able to get detected by this and will turn it red. So in this video though, we want to focus on just animating it. So the idea here is we'll have like a starting position of 45, and we'll go ahead and we'll animate that to -45. So to do this, we're going to use the animation system. So the first thing we want to do is have the object selected that we want to animate, which is camera_1. From there, you want to open up the animation window by going to Window, Animation, and that's going to bring up the dope sheet. With the camera 1 selected, we want to then create an animation clip for this. So let's create. Let's go into the Great Fleece folder, your game folder, animations, and let's create a new folder to house the animation. So we'll call this camera system or cameras. And we're going to right click in here, create a new folder. Cameras. And inside this folder, we will call this camera rotate. We should be able to use the same animation clip on both of those cameras, but we'll take a look at that when we get to it. So call this camera rotate, or security cam even. Security cam. And that's going to create an animation clip. It's going to automatically add an animator component with the camera_1 controller. If it didn't, go ahead and create an animator component by right-clicking, create component, or add component animator, and drag in the controller that it created, which was camera 1. And you'll see here in your animation folders that it created the security cam with the camera 1. The next thing you want to do is reselect the object we're animating, and let's start recording its animation. So click the record button, and on the first frame, we want to set its rotation to -45, +45. And the goal here is how long do we want this transition to take? Let's say we want the full rotation to take 1 second. Move in your timeline track here to the 1 second mark and change the value to -45. If we stop playing and we preview this, you'll see here that we have the rotation and the expected behavior that we're looking for. The idea here though is that we want it to ping pong back and forth. So to do this, if we run our game right now, it's just going to be looping indefinitely. One of the things we want to do once you have the animation clip created is go to your animations folder, go to your cameras folder, select the security cam animation, and turn loop time off. This will prevent it from looping, creating that restart effect. The next thing we want to do is you want to save your scene and then hop into the controller aspect. Inside here, right away, we want to go ahead and play that security cam animation. However, when it's finished, we want it to play in reverse. So how can we do that? One of the properties of this animation is the speed. If we set the speed to 1, it's going to play at normal speed. If we set it to 0, it's going to be paused. If we set it to -1, it will play in reverse. So what we can do is we can create visual logic to animate this back and forth. So what I want to do is we have this animation clip being the first speed, which is going to be normal speed. It's just going to play from 45 to -45. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this animation, we're going to copy it, we're going to paste, and we'll call this security cam reverse in the inspector. And we want to create transitions to and from this animation. And the goal here is that this animation is going to play in reverse by setting it to -1 speed. Let's save our script, save our scene, hop into Unity, run your game, and let's see if our camera is animating. And there you go. We have our camera rotation effect. Now, right now it's moving at about 60 frames per second. So let's go ahead and slow it down a bit. To slow it down, we can select the object we have animated, which is this camera 1. And inside the security cam in our animation view, we can change the sample rate, which is going to control the speed. So to make it half as fast, we can set these samples to 30 and test it out. So it's a little slower. To make it even slower, maybe set this to about 15 frames per second. And we get this nice pan effect. So you can go ahead and adjust this and make it to whatever you'd like. I'm probably actually going to stick with 10 samples. And I'm very happy with this result. So if we run the game one last time, we should see that it's functioning as desired. And there we go. So in this challenge, I want you to animate that second camera. I want you to try and use the same animation clip and controller. We shouldn't have to animate both cameras. I'll see you guys in the challenge review. In this challenge review, we're going to animate the other camera. Now, because these cameras, all we're doing is modifying the rotation values, on the second camera here, the same should be applied. 45 degrees to -45 degrees. There shouldn't be any reason we can't share the animation clips. So what I want to try and do is go to Add Component, Animator, and I want to simply drag in the controller so that it uses the animations. If we save this and we run our game, both cameras should now be animating. Because all that animation is doing is modifying the rotation values, not the positions. And there we go. As simple as that, we have two animating cameras, and if we wanted to offset them, you totally could by just switching the controller. You would need a custom controller for that, but you could totally offset them, make one start in reverse and one start in the positive direction. But again, it would require a second camera controller, which you could just duplicate. All right, that wraps up this challenge review, and I'll see you in the next video. In this challenge, what I want you guys to do is make it so that when we walk through these security cameras, Darren gets detected and it triggers the game over cutscene. Now, what I'm going to assist you with here is how do we turn these into triggers? So we notice that when we select the cameras, that we actually can see mesh material on these game objects. So this is using what's called a mesh collider, and it's basically taking the shape of the 3D geometry. And we have something here called convex, and this convex here is going to allow it to actually collide with other colliders. So here, when we turn that on, you can see here it's going to create mesh colliders around it. So it's going, and this is far more accurate than us using like a sphere for these cameras. So the collision detection is just better. So one of the things you're going to want to do here is you want to make sure isTrigger is set to true. And then it's just going to function as any other game object. So you'll still use onTriggerEnter. And when you onTriggerEnter, you want to make sure that you enable the game over cutscene. So to get you started on the script name, let's go ahead and create a new C# script and call it security camera. Security camera. I'll see you guys in the challenge review. In this challenge review, we're going to create the trigger system for the security camera. The first thing we're going to want to do is select both of the cameras, and we want to make sure whichever object has the collider, which seems to be the camera cone here, that's where the trigger is going to go. So if we select both camera cones, we can add the trigger object or trigger script to both of them. So select both camera cone and drag the security cam into the inspector. This is going to attach that script as a component to both objects. We can now go ahead and detect Darren. Okay, let's straighten up our script here. And we can delete everything because we're working with onTrigger. And let's start with void onTriggerEnter, collider other. And what we want to check for is if Darren, which is our player, right? So if other.tag, if it's our player, then what do we need to do? We need to set off our game over cutscene, which means we need a game object variable to hold that object. So here we have public game object, and we'll call it game over cutscene. Let's save this, hop into our if statement here. So if the player collides with one of these cameras, what needs to happen? We're just going to take that game over cutscene, and we're going to set active true. That's going to enable the game object, and our cutscene will take over. Let's save this, head back into Unity, let your code compile. And run your game. Oh, and before actually running, you want to make sure that in the inspector, you've added your game over cutscene. So 1 minute. It looks like my Unity is not compiling with that script, so I may need to actually close Visual Studios and reopen it. Or here we go, just save the script. There we go. Unity is now recompiling. Once it compiles, we're going to need to select both objects here, both camera cones again, and we want to add the game over cutscene. So here it's looking for a game object. If we drop down the cutscene, we have our game over cutscene. Drag that in here. From there, we can go ahead and save our scene, run Unity, and we should be good to go. In the scene view, you can see that our cameras are rotating. Let's go ahead and make our way over there. We'll get past the first guard.
Darren, if you toss a coin in another location using the right mouse button, then the guards will be distracted, allowing you to sneak on by. Give it a shot.
All right, and let's go ahead and we'll distract them. Let's get through here. Slowly but surely making our way. We'll go up the stairs.
You made it. It looks like this area is being patrolled by a guard as well as security cameras. Try to sneak behind the cameras around the columns or underneath the cameras themselves.
Okay, so one of the things you'll notice in that voiceover dialogue there was that it mentioned that there was another guard walking. The idea here is that we're going to place a guard by the wind state condition, and when you toss that coin, he's also going to go check out the disturbance, so you'll have to avoid him. And we'll get to that when we complete the win section of this game. So here I'm going to go ahead and get triggered by this. And one of the things I just realized is it's probably not going to work because it's missing the most important aspect. On each of these, it's missing a rigid body. So as soon as I add a rigid body, it should detect Darren. And there you go, game over cutscene. So everything is now working. You want to make sure you stop your game because anything you add during play mode is just going to disappear. So re-add the component of rigid body and set gravity to false. And there you go. We have a functioning detection system. I'll see you guys in the next challenge. In this video, you're going to be introduced to something that we haven't covered yet in Timeline, and that is hiding our game assets. Watch what happens when I get triggered by this security cam. And specifically, let's focus on where Darren is in the scene. I'm going to trigger it, and you'll see here that if I pause the video, we can see Darren in the corner here. Darren is in our shot. He should not be in the shot. The idea here is that the actor should be in play, but the game asset should be hidden. So what can we do to resolve this? We want to basically hide our actor. So to solve this problem, it's really easy. Let's open up our game over cutscene, the game object that has the playable director, enable it, and the next thing I want to do is look at our timeline track. To open up the timeline window, you can go to Window, Timeline, or you can drop down and double click the playable director in the inspector. This will open up our timeline editor. From here, we can play back our timeline. And what I want to do is we need to add an activation track to hide Darren. So let's look at how we can do this. We can go to Add, Activation Track, and we're going to add our player into this object. The next thing you want to do is how long should our player be active for? So right now, Darren is active for the entire cutscene. What we want to do is Darren is only active for the last frame of the cutscene. What we can do is we can take this activation clip and let's set it to the last frame. So you can drag it and make sure that it's on frame 599 over here in the clip timing. So you can see here, 599, the end is 600 frames. So from here, what we can do is we can go ahead and play test this. And when we do, Darren is going to be gone. And then the game object will actually re-enable at that point. All right, so we have Darren there, the player, and let's go ahead and test this out. So what we want to do is we want to run the game, and we want to get back to this detection point, and we want to see if Darren is in the shot. I'll see you guys in a moment. Make sure that you turn off your game over cutscene object. And let's run the game, and let's get back to these security cams. I'm going to fast forward through the game so that I can get here, so pause the video and get in front of the security cam. Okay, so here we are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and step into this, and let's see if Darren can be seen. All right, and you'll see here in the scene view, there's no Darren. And that's exactly what we're looking for. At the very end, Darren should pop back in. And there you go. Darren's popped back in. We can't even see the game anymore, so it doesn't even matter. All right, because it's game over, so you'll either restart or quit. So there we go. We have successfully hid Darren when the cutscene is active. So I'll see you guys in the next video. In this video, when Darren gets detected and we play our game over cutscene, one of the things that we want to do is we want to have these security cameras go from green to red. Now, already in our timeline, we're filming them. So what we want to do here is through code, when Darren gets detected, we want to access the material property on the camera, and we're going to change it to red. So how do we go about doing that? So looking at this camera one holder here, what is on this object? And if we actually go into the camera cone, what is happening here? So if we turn off the mesh renderer, that's what's actually controlling the light. So as you can see here on the camera cone object, if we modify the mesh renderer, that's what we want to do. We want to basically grab the mesh renderer, we want to go into the materials, and we want to change the color of this material to be a red. So for instance, we can select this material, and we're going to change it to be like a red tone, okay? So we can do this entirely through code, and what I want you to do is I want you to research how to modify a material color through code. Starts with Google. I'll see you in the challenge review. In this challenge review, I'm going to show you how we could create this camera effect where it's going to go from green to red when Darren is detected. So let's select our camera cones here, and we want to set them back to their initial starting position. So if we select both the cones, we want to make sure that the materials are back to normal. Select them and go back and make it that green tint. Okay, so we have our security cams here, and what we need to do is open up our script for when we detect Darren, and that's where we're going to add the logic for turning them red. So if we look in our code here, underneath our security cam, we want to open up that script. Here is our security cam. You can reload the solution if you have to. And in here, when Darren gets caught and we activate the cutscene, before we actually activate the cutscene, let's go ahead and set them to red. So here, we need to change the material. Now, how do we change a material through code? So what you should have done is you should have opened up Google, and let's search for how to change the color of an object or the material. So how to change color of material in Unity. And what we're going to see here is there's a scripting API for material.setColor. And in here, you can see here that sets a named color value. So there's one way we can do this. And let's see here. Want to read the description. Many shaders use more than one color. Use set color to change the color identified by shader property name or unique property name. So here we have a string name and a color value. Now this is if you wanted to access the specific shader value. So technically this isn't what we want to use, although you can see here that this probably would work. And you can see here that you can get a handle onto the renderer. And then here they're saying renderer.material.shader. We don't want to change the shader and then set the color. We don't want to access the shader. That's not what we're doing. We just want to actually change the color of a material. So if we actually look on the material here, in the documentation here, there's a color property. The main material is color. And let's see how we access this. Very similar. They get a handle to the renderer component, and then they can say renderer.material.color. And that's going to get the color of the material, and then here they can assign it a new color. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So first thing first, hop back into our code, and let's get a handle onto our renderer component. So here we're going to say mesh renderer, call it renderer or render equals get component, and we want the material or we want the mesh renderer off that game object. So here, mesh renderer. Now that I have the mesh renderer component, we can type renderer.material to get the material, and it's almost like a hierarchy ladder structure. If we look in the inspector here on the camera cone, I'm getting the mesh renderer, I'm hitting dot materials, and now now that I have that material, what do I want to change about it? Dot color. Here, dot color, and we can assign it a new color. Now, how do I know that I can assign it a new color? In the tooltip, it says get and set. So I can either get the color or I can set the color. And we're going to use a new color. You can do new color, and you can actually specify the RGB value. Or what you can do is Unity has predefined colors. So we can say color.red. Or if we want blue, you could say color.blue, black, any color you want on the predefined list. Color.red. Let's save this, head back into Unity, and let's test this out. Pause the video and get back to where Darren is about to get caught by the guards. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to get caught by the security cam here, and when we get detected, it should turn red. All right, so it did not turn red. So why not? If we look at our script here, security camera, we are accessing the mesh renderer, the material, and then the color property, but it didn't turn red. So what I want to do is I want to figure out why this isn't working. Now, if you look here, we're accessing the mesh renderer and the material. And if we look at the material, if this was a standard shader, this would have worked just fine. But if we actually select the material, if you look on your camera cone here, and you actually click on the element 0 camera cone green light, this actually isn't a standard shader, which is why this issue is occurring. Which means we actually have to access this tint color property of the shader and then modify it. And that actually comes down to what that method was that we saw earlier, where it was using that set color. That set color property is going to allow us to actually access a different type of shader. So here we get a handle onto our mesh renderer, and then here we're saying shader, and then shader.find specular. Now, I'm not 100% sure that we actually need to do that because it's already in the material property, so it should know what shader it is. However, we do want to use set color, and then here it's asking for the name property. So property name example underscore color. For us, it would be tint color. And I believe in Unity, the standard shader, or this specific shader, is underscore tint color. So to find out and confirm that, we want to get the shader, or we want to actually look at the shader for this tint color here. So let's see here, and let's type in, or even if you didn't know how to do this, right, you could actually just type in change color of particles additive shader in Unity. And adjusting the tint of a particle additive shader is a question that's probably commonly asked. So here it says it gives me an error, color is not a member of UnityEngine.material. So material.color equals X is a shortcut for material set color underscore color X. Particle additive uses underscore tint color rather than underscore color. So the shortcut won't work. Now this is from a moderator of Unity. I'm assuming he knows exactly what he's talking about. So let's try that. So let's do the material set color, and instead we're going to use underscore tint color. Hop back into Unity. Open up your script. We're not going to do this, but we are going to say renderer.setColor or renderer.material.setColor. And from here, we're going to use underscore tint, I believe, underscore tint color. And we're going to assign it a value of color.red. Let's save this, head back into Unity, run your game, go ahead and pause the video and get back to these security cams, and I'll see you when you get there.
Cameras around the columns or underneath the
All right, and there you go. So here we have a bright burning red. So that's definitely not necessarily the color we want. So instead what we're going to do is we're actually going to use an RGB value. So if you select the shader or the material and we bring it to a red that we want, like I'd say this is really the look we're going for. It's this just red sort of fade, maybe making it a little darker. What I want to do is I want to grab these values. So write these down as 154, 29, 29, and 10, or remember it. Or while we have this up, while we do that, let's go ahead and actually open up our code here. And what we're going to do is instead of positioning color.red here, we're going to create a color variable that's going to hold the color to change it to. So we'll call this color, and we're going to set it equal to a new color. And we're going to use the values, the RGBA values that are here. So 154, 29, 29, 10. Here we go. 154, 29, 29, and 10. Save this. And instead of color.red, we want to go ahead and place color here. That's our variable. Let's save this. And another way, by the way, that you could have found this tint color is if you actually right-click the shader here. If you right-click the shader up here, the camera cone greenlit material, you can actually edit the shader. And this is actually going to bring up the properties here in the inspector. And what you can see is the properties of underscore tint color. So that's how that moderator knew what he was talking about. Okay, so we have the tint color that we want. Let's go ahead and select the material. And let's change it back to the default green and run it again. Okay. So go ahead and pause your video, get Darren back to these cameras, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to step into this camera here. And something got very screwed up with this. So here I am about to get hit by this green thing here. And I want to try and figure out why the material is turning into what it is. If I stop the game and actually look at this material, it looks like it became a plain white texture. And if we drop this down, you can see here the tint color went full white. So it didn't exactly acknowledge our color properties. And you can see here that as I opened it, it tried to actually set it to our values. It says invalid normalized color. Normalized value is 0. So what I think this means is that it's also looking for the set decimal values. It could be a shader issue with this type of shader. So what we want to do is 154, 29, 29, and 10, we need to actually convert those to the decimal values. So the way in code that some colors work is it starts at 0 and then goes to 1, and that's the equivalent of 0 to 255. So to get the decimal values, all we have to do is just take the actual value, which is 154, and divide that by 255 to get the decimal value between 0 and 1. So for instance, I could say 154 divided by 255, and we're going to put 0.6. Same goes for the next one, which is 29 divided by 255. That would be this color value in a normalized sense, so 0.11. So let's go ahead and open up our color and start adding in these values here. So instead of 154, we're going to have 0.6, so 0.6f, followed by 0.11f, or 0.1f, 0.1f, and then for our alpha, we just basically would be 10 divided by 255. We're going to be at like 0.03. So actually that might be a little too low. I think for the alpha, we want maybe like a 30% alpha. So let's just put 0.3. Okay, let's try this. Let's save it. Head back into Unity. And let's get back to our camera position here. Pause the video. I'll see you when you get here. Okay, so here we are. Let's step into this and see what happens. And there we go. That's a much better look that we're looking for. So sorry about all the confusion in this video. I hope you learned a bit about how to debug these problems, but we have the desired result. In the next video, we are going to freeze the camera on Darren, make it red, and then trigger the cutscene. I'll see you then. In this challenge, the behavior that we want for this camera is when Darren gets detected, the animation should stop. And the easiest way to stop the animation is if we look on the actual camera game object that's being animated, if you actually just enable and disable the animator component on it, it will actually stop the animation. So what I would like you guys to do is create the behavior to freeze the camera, so freeze the animation by disabling this component. And then after, say, a half a second, once the camera's been frozen and the player can see that it's red, signifying they got caught, then play the cutscene. So go ahead and wait about half a second before playing this cutscene. So the things you'll need to do is get a handle to the animator component. Now remember, this script is on 2 game objects, so make it modular. Don't make it specific to one camera. So get a handle to the animator component, and then here, gameoverCutscene.setActive, you want this to call after 5 seconds, or I'm sorry, call after 0.5 seconds. So what can we use to call that after 0.5 seconds? I'll give you a hint. It's called a coroutine. I'll see you guys in the challenge review. In this challenge review, I'm going to show you how we can freeze the camera and delay calling our cutscene to turn active after 0.5 seconds. So to do this, let's get a handle onto our animator component. To do this, we want to do public animator, and we're going to call this public animator, and we can say anim. Now the reason why it's public is so that I can kind of just drag these components into the inspector. Ideally though, best practice would be to keep it private, but to demonstrate the ability to keep this modular and control which animator we're getting, I want to demonstrate it this way. So I'm going to stop running Unity, and if we look on each camera cone, it's asking now for an animator component once it compiles. As you can see here, it's looking for an animator. So we're going to drag camera 1 for this one. And for this one, we're going to drag camera 1. Make sure you select the camera you want to work with and grab its parent and just drag it in there. Now our script knows about the parent object. And what we want to do here is after we change the material, we want to freeze the camera. So here we're going to say anim.enabled is false. And that's going to actually turn off that animator component, causing the animation to freeze. From there, we want to delay the call of this method here, this line of code, for 0.5 seconds. So to do that, we're going to use a coroutine. So enumerator, and we'll call this, let's call this alert routine. And in here, we want to yield return wait for new seconds. So yield return new wait for seconds. and let's pass in 0.5f for 0.5 seconds. After that, we're going to say game over cutscene dot set active becomes true. Lastly, we need to delete this line of code and replace it with start coroutine and then alert routine. Let's save our script, head back into Unity, and let's give this a go. Go ahead and get Darren back to these cameras, and I'll see you in a moment. All right, here we go. So let's check out what happens when we get detected. It should turn red, freeze, and then call our coroutine. And there you go. Freezed. There's Darren and our cutscene. Good deal. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video.